perhaps the most debated chapter in all of the Tanakh we study today, the 53rd chapter of the book of Yeshayah, the book of Isaiah. And you don't know why, or perhaps you do, but you will know. Mi ha'emin l'shmuatenu zro Adonai al mi niglata. Who can believe what we have heard? Upon whom has the arm of God been revealed? In the last chapter, we talked about the arm of God and waking up Bnei Yisrael, returning them back, that it's not going to be b'chipazon, as we said yesterday. The first from Egypt, Bnei Yisrael were taken out b'chipazon in a rush, but this second time, the true messianic redemption will not be b'chipazon. Everything will be revealed, will be so great nobody will believe it. Vayal kayonek lefanav v'chashoresh me'eretz tziyah lo toar v'lo hadar v'nir'ehu v'lo mar'eh v'nechmedehu. Because it has grown by God's favor like a tree crown, like a tree that's grown up, had no form or beauty that we would look at, no charm that we should find him pleasing, right? It was surprising. It came out of nowhere, this incredible greatness from a people who were humble. It was like small little bushes that became huge cedar trees. Nivzeh v'chadal ishim, ish machavot vidui choli. And now we go from seemingly from looking at Bnei Israel as a totality and as a group and as a plural to as an individual. So it could be talking about Bnei Israel. That's one understanding. He was despised, shunned by others, a man of suffering, familiar with disease, who hid his face from us. He was hated. He was embarrassed. Nobody paid attention to him. Right? Who's this referring to? Is it referring to all of Bnei Israel? As I said, is it referring to a specific person? Achein cholyenuhu nasa umachovenu sivala. V'anachnu chashavnuhu nagua muka Elohim ume'uneh. Yet it was our sickness that he was bearing, our suffering that he endured. We plagued him. He was smitten and afflicted by God. So, of course, here from this verse, if it wasn't clear enough, this verse demonstrates, and will continue, why this verse is the most, in many ways, I don't know the most, but perhaps the most debated and verse in the Tanakh, and a verse whose debates have had extremely consequential results. Because this is the chapter known as the suffering servant, the servant who is suffering, the servant who's bearing our pains, he who has been plagued. So obviously this is the chapter above all of the many chapters and the many references that Christians find in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, as statements that prove the validity of Jesus as the Messiah. This is one of the main ones. Obviously, Jews do not believe that. You know, Jesus might have come, he might have been injured, he might have suffered, but last time I checked, the other things in these chapters, the prophecies of greatness and of messianic redemption, have certainly not happened for the Jewish people, let alone the world. Who might it then be talking about? Those who say it's Yeshayah. There are those who say it refers all the way back maybe to Moshe, who suffered as the leader of the Jewish people. There are those who say it was Yirmiyahu, whose book we will learn next, who suffered due to all of the warnings of destruction. There are those who say it is the future Messiah. So lots of different interpretations as to who this suffering servant can be or might be. Let's continue with the chapter. Achein. Oh, that we read that. Sorry. Pasuk Hey, verse 5. V'hu micholal mipisha'enu miduka me'avonotenu musar shlomenu alav. But he was wounded because of our sins, crushed because of our iniquities. He bore the difficulty that made us whole, and by his bruises we were healed. Kulanu katson ta'inu ish ledarko paninu. We all went the wrong way. We went astray, each of us going in his own way. And God visited upon him the guilt of all of us. Nigash v'hu na'aneh v'lo yiftach piv hasel letevach yuval u'kerachel lifnei gozazeha ne'elma v'lo yiftach piv. He was treated in a terrible way, right? He was not listened to, and he suffered. He did not open his mouth. He was like a sheep being led to slaughter, like a ewe, like a something that's dumb, that doesn't understand. He did not open his mouth. He did not know. And if that verse in verse 7 seems to reference the Sa'ir La'azazel, the scapegoat that was thrown off of the mountain that takes all of the sins of Bnei Yisrael with it, or some of the sins, not all the sins, on Yom HaKippurim, on the Day of Atonement. And so obviously that, we understand it in that way. It's a goat. The goat is not Jesus in our understanding, in our interpretation. But you could see obviously with the wording here as to why it's understood that way by the Christian community. By oppressive judgment he was taken away. Who could describe his place of living? He was cut off from the land of the living through the sin of my people who deserved the punishment. So, right, it's going to be great. There's going to be suffering. So, if you look at Rashi here, Rashi says it means the non-Jews. That's who it refers to. They're going to suffer for all the things that they have done to us in the past. That's who it is. But a lot of different interpretations. Again, who is this individual? Who is this person? V'yitein rishaim kivrov yet ashir bimotav alocha masasa v'lo mirma bepiv. And his grave was set amongst the wicked, and with the rich in death, though he had done no injustice and had spoken no falsehood. And here, no, not all the rich. There are many wonderful rich people. Here the implication is that the wealthy, the rich, these are the wealthy and the rich who have taken advantage of the poor. Could be the rich nations who conquered Bnei Israel, could right, the rich people who take advantage of the poor. But either way, it's saying that his grave is not with the right people. He's by and with the wicked. V'Adonai chafetz Oh hecheli im tasim asham nafsho yireh zera yarich yamin v'chifetz Adonai biyado yitzlach. But God chose to crush him with disease, with sickness. Right? He might have seen offspring and might have lived long, and through him God's purpose might prosper. Right? There was a possibility that if the people weren't bad and this servant wasn't suffering. I think of Yeshayah, who, right, if he's described as the servant back in chapter 49, perhaps chapter 41, other places, Koresh, Cyrus is described as the servant, or like we said, a number of different, Yirmiyahu, the Melech HaMashiach, maybe all the way Moshe, right? If Bnei Israel had listened fully during the days of Yeshayah, maybe the 10 tribes wouldn't have been exiled, which happened by Sancherib during Yeshayah's lifetime. Maybe during the days of Yirmiyah, Bnei Israel would have listened enough, maybe they would have changed their ways completely, maybe God would have changed his mind and would not have destroyed the temple. So the possibility is there through the prophet to change these things, but the people didn't listen. Out of his anguish he shall see it. He shall enjoy to the fullest in completion due to his devotion. My righteous servants makes the many righteous. It is their punishment that he bears. Lachein, therefore, achalek lo varabim v'atatzumim yichalek shalal tachat asher he'era lamavet nafsho v'at poshim nimna. Therefore, I will give him the many as his portion. He will receive much as his bounty, as his spoil, because he gave death and was numbered amongst the sinners, right? The sinners were the ones who should die, not this servant of God who listened to God. Whereas he bore the guilt of many, and he brought, and he interceded and carried the sins of others. And so here we have a chapter. It's a very difficult chapter, forgetting the arguments, forgetting the obvious for Christians references to Jesus. It's a very difficult chapter to think of the whole concept of the suffering servant, that somebody had to suffer and take the sins of Bnei Israel with them. Right? It's one thing to say it was a goat. I mean, I don't know if the PETA people will like it, but it's one thing to say it was a goat, and we took a goat and we throw it off the cliff in the desert. The Seir La'azazel is one thing, But to say that a person should suffer so much for the sins of his nation, somebody who could have been great and somebody who should have brought Bnei Israel back to God into some sort of messianic period, it's a very, very difficult chapter theologically. Obviously, there are places in the Tanakh and in the Gemara which speak about the idea of Yisurin, of somebody being punished is the wrong word, but having difficulty in their life, in the hope, God hopes that they will be redeemed and hope that they will see it and they will turn their ways. Right? They will look at their ways and they will change the ways that they live. But to see that this person is suffering on behalf of the rest of the nation, and that suffering is going to bring redemption to the people, or is going to bring somehow some sort of atonement to the people, is not the normative and the regular chapter, I think, in general Jewish theology. But with 929 chapters in the Tanakh and many, many pages in the Gemara and many, many midrashim and other lessons that have been brought, it's not a surprise that there will at times be contradictory, or there will be very, very different viewpoints theologically in the way that God runs the world and the role of people, both Bnei Israel and Gentiles, in living our lives in God's earth.